The Suns had an impressive win over the Washington Wizards on Sunday. Obviously, you want to apply the context of who they're going against, but still, and kind of even looking at it with that caveat to everything that you're seeing, it's still important for them to consistently find their legs and find ways to stamp their identity over games, and also consistently just build layers within their process, generally, and on each individual side of the ball. We saw a little bit of that with how Bradley Beal was featured. We saw a little bit of that with how they played off of the Kevin Durant post-up touches. And we also saw a little bit of that in terms of how they're continuing to find ways to stamp and really find flow with their defensive decision-making in their defensive process. So let's just kind of dive into those three entities of their win over the Wizards from Sunday. First up, we're going to be looking at them just getting across the half-court line as I stop it here with 20 seconds left. I think that's an important thing. Sometimes they can bog themselves down and kind of do themselves somewhat of a disadvantage and having to work harder in the half-court with less time on the clock. Crossing the half-court line with 18, 17, 16, almost getting an 8-second count. And then only having that much time left on the shot clock to get into offense and then start getting into manipulating matchups and things of that nature. When they're able to do a better job of getting across the half-court line earlier within the half-court process, them having that extra 4 seconds of shot clock to play with is all the world when they're able to generate the different type of advantages and have that extra time to get an extra paint touch and attract the attention of a defense to then play out of advantage-wise. It means the world to this team, especially with the level of talents that they have on the offensive side of the floor. So seeing them do this and do this consistently again, regardless of who the opponent is very important to their process on the offensive side. And in addition to that, you hear me talk about Bradley Beal's drives all the time. They get across the half-court line with 20 seconds on the shot clock. They get a Bradley Beal early shot clock paint touch, something that I continue to hammer home as being important to their general process, but also to how he's being featured and being enabled in terms of playing to his strengths and optimizing his skill sets. Getting this across the half-court line at 20 seconds, getting a paint touch from Bradley Beal with 18 seconds on the shot clock, already generating an advantage. He's engaging Jusuf Nurkic's man, and the pace at which Nurkic is coming into play into the half-court is all just perfectly timed. It's all in sync. Nurkic's going to be able to easily soft-touch floater to start the game for the Suns, early in the game rather, and that's all just really good process from them. And then looking at Bradley Beal again here, this time, seeing him in, this is the action we've broken down a million times already this season, and it's always typically with Kevin Durant or Devin Booker. And I feel like it's important to note this because this is an easy way to sneakily involve Bradley Beal into the offensive process. Obviously, KD and Devin Booker get more touches in terms of initiating offense a little bit more at times and being the primary option within actions at times as well. A sneaky way to generate some of that movement stuff you like to get into all the time is by having Bradley Beal be the one that's inbounding and having him play off of the zoom action they like to get into from the sideline out of bounds. And obviously that is going to then see Kevin Durant and Devin Booker enable the spacers on the second side, which obviously optimizes your spacing, giving Bradley Beal, your best downhill threat, all the space and real estate in the world to work with. And you add to that, he's doing it even off of movement. And though this one's kind of stagnated in terms of their flow through it, you can still see the advantage that's created with him being able to come off the handoff and then receive a little bit of a screen from Nurkic. In addition to that, he's able to get downhill, immediately engage the big, and we're going to pay attention to the little details within this drive because this is a very, very, very impressive one. Obviously, again, with Bradley Beal having Devin Booker one pass away, and then in that strong corner is Kevin Durant, you're going to see Denny Avdia, who's guarding Devin Booker, not even completely at the nail. He's barely even got a piece of the elbow here. And that just speaks to the threat of the spacing that they have and how the presentation changes how they're able to get to their defensive responsibilities and principles. Nonetheless, on this touch, Bradley Beal gets downhill. Look at the fake pass that gets the reaction out of Daniel Gafford in his drop and makes him go from towing the line in terms of committing to the ball and sticking to the roller. As soon as Bradley Beal throws a little fake pass, the yo-yo dribble, the Chris Paul yo-yo dribble in there, you see the reaction that gets out of Gafford. He goes from toeing the line to jumping back towards being closer to the roller than to the ball. And then Bradley Beal is going to be able to advantageous pickup point. And look at the finish on the extended arm with the cuff. As I pause it right here. Incredible. Great dexterity, great creativity on the fly. And then to be able to play the board with the right spin like that through contact, one of the best drivers in the game of basketball, man. That is just so special. It's so impressive. And then next right here, again, looking at Beal getting into movement. They got Nurkic initiating offense now, getting into delay action. You see Nurkic pointing out who he wants to go to early in the clock. You see them crossing it this time with 19 seconds. Still solid in terms of when they're crossing the line. Getting into offense, you get the screen into the handoff. Solid screen set again from Nurkic. I'll continue to hammer this home. You can't overlook these things because there's teams in the league that don't consistently set these screens, whether it's handoffs or pick and roll. And the Suns have at least one player that's consistently doing that. And that consistently is prying open their primary options for easier looks than them having to always work through highly contested shots and working through having to create space for themselves. Nurkic is creating the space off of his girth and just being able to screen and do so without obviously fouling. Beal's able to come off scot-free, knocks down the three. And then here's Beal kind of initiating a little bit. We're going to see them being the Wizards jump to weak him in pick and roll coverage as Nurkic comes into the mix. You see Nurkic go to flip the angle, and you see Beal, his man Kispert, jump into his hip to keep him towards the outer third of the floor to his weak hand and weak coverage, keeping him to that outer third to try to keep him away from getting to the paint. Obviously, I always talk about the Suns not fighting pressure, always having counters baked into their process to flow through that without having to concede time on the shot clock trying to do so. And we see them getting to that right here. Nurkic ends up just floating the space with Gafford staying off of him, not crossing the three-point line. And then by way and by nature of them being so aggressive and being so anticipatory with the type of actions that the Suns always flow into, which are these handoffs, Kispert's trying to jump topside to keep Bradley Beal from getting his handoff and make that flow a little bit tougher. But because he's doing that, in addition to with Nurkic now having the ball, Gafford being closer to the three-point line, guess what? The paint is wide open. And guess who recognizes that? Before anybody else, Yusuf Nurkic. And then who else realizes that after that? Bradley Beal. So if you're playing pressuring Bradley Beal this far away from the basket, in addition to your opposing big stepping up to guard Nurkic because he has the ball in his hands in delay action, this high above the three-point line, nobody's in the paint. In addition to the spacers that the Suns have with Grayson Allen being in the strong corner, and then we got Devin Booker in the weak side corner. So the low man is going to be a little bit behind schedule in terms of trying to get there. Bradley Beal gets down here quickly. Nurkic hits him with a timely pocket pass. And we're going to pay attention again to the details because Avdia is not necessarily late, but it's the timing and the way in which Bradley Beal goes up for this layup that throws off all of the timing that Avdia is trying to get into in terms of his secondary rim protection. So you see the great backdoor pass through the window from Nurkic to Beal. And look at the foot that Bradley Beal jumps off of. This is wrong-footed. The wrong-footed layup throws off the timing of the potential rim protection and verticality with a contest from Avdia, and that enables Bradley Beal the opportunity to get an uncontested layup there. And then here looking at more of their process with Bradley Beal. This is one of my favorite reps. I love when the Suns get into these. So they're going to pitch it into the elbow to Nurkic. And then we're seeing they like to usually get into staggers from this action. So we see staggers typically from Devin Booker and Kevin Durant would be for Grayson Allen based off of the alignment here. But usually it's Devin Booker or Kevin Durant that's in that corner. Nonetheless, we see it instead going into kind of a wide screen here from Devin Booker, for Kevin Durant. But look at what Nurkic is doing. And look at how the floor spacing and just the general positioning of everything is manipulated. We see Nurkic turn his back. Obviously, he's going into a handoff now with Bradley Beal. But as this screen, I want to pay attention to the first part of this play. As the screen is being set from Devin Booker for Kevin Durant, look at how both of their players are hugged up on them and the space that's ultimately going to create as we now revert our attention back to the ball where Nurkic and Bradley Beal get into an empty corner handoff. The space that Bradley Beal is going to be enabled to play with is coming directly from all of the space that's manipulated here from Kevin Durant. and Devin Booker being involved in action, just dummy action here, screening for each other. The reaction it gets out of the defense and the space that it manipulates for Bradley Beal to come off of this handoff from Jusuf Nurkic without having to worry about any type of help from the nail coming from that empty corner. He's able to engage the big. Gafford's late getting over. He's able to get up this soft touch floater, and that's a bucket. And then next rep here, we're going to see a little bit more of the same. This time, those two just working off script with each other in a reserve adjacent lineup here. So we see the pitch, and them getting to try to get in and get action, do a solid job having it denied initially. The pace is kind of muddy, but seeing them being able to get into these multiple handoff actions and be able to play off script with unpredictability like this is extremely important to the Suns' offensive process. It's an offense in and of itself. And as they continue to iron out the kinks in terms of flow and the different pockets of the floor where they can get into this within actions, it's going to consistently be a problem, not unlike we've seen from Steph Curry with Draymond Green in the past, and consistently to this day, actually. And also as we saw with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic over the last couple of years, and especially in the playoffs last season. That's the type of synergy those two players have, and it's going to be a dynamic the Suns can lean into more as games grow more meaningful, as moments grow more meaningful over the course of games. And then here we're going to see a little bit more of the same. And I like this rep again because this time it's going to be Kevin Durant rejecting the wide screen here from Jusuf Nurkic. And watch how they shapeshift the court balance and the spacing on the floor as they pitch it over to Nurk. And now guess what? Again, they're getting into another empty corner handoff between Jusuf Nurkic and Bradley Beal. Oh, wait. Because we've gotten you so many times, you think it's coming again. Now they have another pressure counter built into their actions where they're not conceding time on the shot clock. Quick backdoor cut from Bradley Beal. And with all of these backdoor cuts with Bradley Beal, we also want to make sure we're paying attention to his route running and the ability for him to be misleading with his body language. He's truly like a wide receiver in terms of selling body language that he's doing one thing and then get into the exact opposite and being able to still leverage, gain separation, and ultimately open himself up for opportunities to finish. And we see just that there. Now going to their spacing and their playoff of Kevin Durant post-ups, something we also talked about on the Take That for Data podcast, the most recent one, the inaugural one, this past Friday that came out on Saturday. It's kind of looking at how the Suns are playing off of the Devin Booker off minutes when it's Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant on the floor. And one of the main contexts of offense we talked about was how they play off of the Durant touches. And I talked about specifically off of the post-ups. A lot of times when they have Devin Booker off the floor and they get to these reserve adjacent lineups, they typically get the ball to Durant in different contexts, and then they sit around and kind of watch, and the offense is super, super stagnant. They have to continue to lean into their movement, especially with having Bradley Beal on the floor, and this is one way they can do so. There's a myriad of ways they can, but this is one way. So they usually have the person that's one pass away move in some capacity, whether that's just sinking or whether that's lifting up from the floor, giving Durant a little bit more space on his initial catch, or they can do so like they do here. A little bit of movement from Bradley Beal. Then he's going to end up receiving a little bit of a pin down. And that pin down is removing any type of extra help that might be coming in to dig at the ball or stunt at Kevin Durant's empty post-up touch. And we see none of that is going to be enabled as the Suns get into movement with Bradley Beal. Ultimately, Durant's going to be enabled space, opportunity without extra attention. And 8 times out of 10 over the course of his career, that's going to be extremely disadvantageous for a defense. He's able to get into that over-the-shoulder pull-up, and that's cash. And then next rep here, we're going to see a little bit more of the same. But this time, look at the difference with them not having movement, and just watch how the defense is able to react to his post touch versus how they were able to on the rep where there was movement. You see how much they collapse the floor. And not just seeing this, imagine yourself in Kevin Durant's position. You could feel when the defense is being able to load up on your touch because of the movement and the lack thereof, in contrast to what we saw from the rep before. He's going to end up still getting a positive result here on a foul, but you can see how this stunt from Landry Shamet is able to have a little bit, even the slightest bit of a reaction from Kevin Durant and speeding up his read and what he wants to get into feel and rhythm-wise in terms of in his post-touch here. Obviously, like I said, he ends up getting a positive result, but the Suns can be better with cycling through different ways to go about manipulating that space around Kevin Durant post-up touches past the stagnant ones like we see here. And then this next rep here, we're going to see a little bit more This time looking at the use of Nurkic dynamic here. So we're seeing more of a starting type lineup with Josh Okogie on the floor at the moment as Devin Booker is looking to check in. Nonetheless, we see them get up the floor early, and because they're moving with pace, we get a mismatch immediately with Kevin Durant on the block, gets the mid-post touch, and look at how the defense is loading up and help. This is a way that we saw the Lakers load up and help multiple times, loading that strong block on the side of a post-up touch for Kevin Durant. And the Suns are cycling through ways to manipulate that space around that, and we see it here with use of Nurkic on the floor this time. It's a little different than when it's Drew Eubanks or potentially even Udoka Azubuike or Chimezie Metu. With Nurkic, he has a better feel for finding those pockets to just be an advantage in. And if you're loading up with your big man on that strong block, imagine it with the Lakers, this was Anthony Davis, like we talked about in previous film session, loading up that strong block. If you load up that strong block with your big, you're typically, especially with Kevin Durant being the one with the post-up, teams are going to be a whole lot smaller on that second side, which is obviously, looking at the size advantage, going to be an advantage the Suns can get into if Yusuf Nurkic does it better in terms of playing in space. And we saw this a lot against the Brooklyn Nets. We see a lot of it here against the Wizards as well. So you see him going into the paint initially, throwing his hand up. Durant doesn't get it to them there, but then we see as he gets into just being a little bit more patient with it, letting the defense come to him as you see them loading up again. Bradley Beal one pass away. Look at Nurkic again after he resets the 2-9 clock. Gets again into the middle of the paint, and then is able to bait them with a pump fake and then get up a finish. Really good process there. And then here we're going to see a little bit more of it again, this time from the opposite side of the floor. And this is stagnant in terms of the spacing, but there's movement from Nurkic now instead of movement from someone on the perimeter. And this is what I mean by them being able to get into manipulating that space a little bit differently. And this time, they don't even get the overload and help from Gafford as they did on the last rep. But Nurkic, because of the leverage, is still able to find himself in advantageous with a catch point here, almost with 1 foot in the restricted area, and he ends up getting fouled. Another positive advantage. And then lastly, just looking at some of the things that the Suns are starting to do a little bit more defensively, being a little bit more aggressive off the ball is going to help them in stagnating flow and really taking away some of the pace and forcing teams to get into secondary and tertiary looks within their actions on offense, or even potentially take them completely out of an action and force them to play and read and react and just without structure. And this is what we're seeing here early in the game. We see them go with the high switch. Now, they've been doing a lot of high switches over the course of the season, but it's the manner in which they're going about doing so, with Devin Booker top locking here on Jordan Poole to take away that him coming off of the staggers and forcing them to go into a counter. So they take away the Jordan Poole look off the initial as he tries to come off of the staggers and the second screen from Gafford. And then look at how that messes up the flow and forces the Wizards to go into a secondary action here. Action's flattened out. Now they have to go in the spread pick and roll as a reaction to the initial defense that the Suns conceded. Now they're slow, reacting on the pass from this skip here from Tyus Jones to the opposite corner. And they got to clean that part of their rotations up. But we want to just pay attention to the successes that they're having and taking away the initial looks from our offense and forcing them to play in the secondary and tertiary actions. Not unlike teams are doing to them. And we need to see more reps with them doing that consistently, especially with teams like we see here in the still frame with the Milwaukee Bucks coming into play tonight. And here we see a little bit more of the same. It's another high switch, but it's a high switch looking to take away pace and steal flow. So they're trying to get into a handoff, into a screen Miami action. It's the exact same as Zoom. Trying to get into that, but because Devin Booker is able to take away that at the high switch and jump in topside, and then in addition to that, still in that pace, he's going to then stay there on that topside hip and stay in ice coverage to keep him to the outer third of the floor. You see the pace that's completely stolen in terms of flow. And then everything is really kind of muddy from there, but they're able to get, obviously, a paint touch in the bucket. But we want to just pay attention to their process on the perimeter and how they're really kind of stealing things and making things a little bit tougher on opponents from that perspective on the defensive side of the floor. And then here, we're going to be looking at another rep, this time looking at Eric Gordon. So we see it's not necessarily staggers that they're really setting here. It's just really them respacing. But you see the communication on the switch here from Devin Booker and Eric Gordon. As you can see, the little bit of an exchange from Corey Kispert and Jordan Poole. Great job being early with their communication As you can see, Devin Booker pointing, letting Eric Gordon know to stay high for the high switch. But again, it's not just passing off the baton. It's them doing it and dictating to the offense in terms of what the pace is and flow is that they're moving with. And we see Eric Gordon do a really good job here as Corey Kispert was burning them with a whole lot of ghost screens and slips and getting reactions and playing within that reaction advantage. Takes away all of that here, just being physical to the legal limit. Corey Kispert can't set a screen. He also can't ghost this, and there's no advantage created. And the shot clock is bleeding away in addition to all of that. And they end up getting it to him, and then they're going to do a solid job just with their switches here out of that. Again, action's completely flattened out again. So they go from 20 to 14 seconds with that switch on Kispert, and then Eric Gordon taking away that pace. And now they take away the pace on the handoff. Now there's 6 seconds left, attacking the isolation. Suns get a stop initially, ends up being a kickball, but that's really good defense. And in this rep here, we're going to be just looking at the reasons why I keep saying that they need more size at the trade deadline, finding a way to add more size on the wing. Because when they're able to manipulate it defensively and get a player like Kevin Durant or Bol as a low man or at the nail, they always see an effective possession with activity in terms of disrupting and taking away looks from an offense. And we see that here. As Tyus Jones come off of the initial handoff, they get into the rescreen. Kevin Durant's now the low man because of that. And look at the effect that it has as he's stepping in with length and activity with his 7'5" wingspan. He's able to take away this passing lane. Instead of a guard or a small from the Suns, which is pretty much the rest of their roster outside of Duranr and Nurkic in terms of the main rotation, instead of it being one of those pieces that's there, this window might be there, but because it's Durant, that window's not there. He's able to get a deflection and then they're out on the break. And in this last rep here, just kind of looking at them flowing through their defensive process, we're going to be looking right here at Yusuf Nurkic and Grayson Allen getting into this pre-switch on the roller or the initial screener. And it's just finding little windows like this to keep Nurkic out of action that they've been cycling through over this recent road stretch. And they've been doing a solid job with it. And it's just something I wanted to point out because look at the activity that they're playing with after that. So you get the pre-switch onto the eventual screener. He ghosts that. They get into the second screen. It's empty side pick and roll now. Look at Bol stepping over the help line. And then look at the switch from Kevin Durant. As we see Grayson Allen trying to help the helper with Bradley Beal as they get a little bit of a overreaction from the ghost screen again from Corey Kispert. Great job from Grayson Allen jumping that. But look at Kevin Durant and his decision-making defensively, but also reading and reacting. Being able to go into the eventual cutter, a really good 45 cut, but Durant's on time with his rotation. And again, because it's him instead of one of their guards that's making this rotation, he's able to get a block. And it's just some of the things that the Suns can see if they do a good job at the trade deadline, finding the right pieces to put around this team with more size on the wing. Decent process from the Suns in this win against the Wizards. They need to see more of it going forward.